Chapter 5, Establishing Your Authority, Ways to Make Him Obey. That not impossible, she who will command my heart and me, Richard Crashaw, wishes to his supposed mistress. Even before you plan and enact your first session, you must understand whence derives the authority of a mistress. Establishing that authority is the first thing a mistress must do. The best scripted session will fail if the submissive cannot believe in and surrender to the dominion of his lady. What follows is a discussion of half a dozen ways to establish and enforce your authority, even while you're receiving the shattering pleasure of an orgasm. Some are more effective than others, but when all are used judiciously in their proper proportion, they will produce a contented submissive and a fulfilled dominatrix. Some of these ideas may seem far-fetched. Nevertheless, ordinary life with all of its worries, fears, and stresses has a death grip on most of us. We need all the help we can get to move into the realm of fantasy. Deliberately choosing to suffer pain and suspense as a path to a happy conclusion can exorcise the demons of doubt, fear, tension, and misery that most of us struggle with every day. Changing our names, our clothes, our surroundings, our behavior can help us free the repressed inner self. The suggestions below offer ways to break the stranglehold of reality and move into the glorious, softly lighted, ritualistic domain of our hidden selves. The script. Because Chapter 6 is devoted to the art of planning, structuring, and enticing an effective discipline scenario, I will not say much about it here, except to remind you that the good scripting is the first essential. A satisfying script will provide both mistress and slave with a thoroughly meaningful experience. Remember that it's the story that takes you and your submissive out of your everyday selves, invests you with almost magical powers, and ultimately provides release. Every technique I discuss in this chapter is a way to emphasize the story and make it more vivid, intense, and believable. A hastily sketched, carelessly plotted fantasy is as boring as most television. If TV effectively relaxed you and your partner, you wouldn't be reading this book. You need a deeper, more individual ritual than you can find in mass media. And books, wonderful as they are, cannot be shared in the same way. Besides, sometimes you need to act. Thus the script, the fantasy, and your compelling role as mistress. Furthermore, a good script will help you, the mistress, remember who you are, the woman in charge. It also provides us with the useful theatrical metaphor which so accurately describes all phases of the dominance and submissive relationship, that it might not be a metaphor at all, but the literal truth. Pain and suspense. When most people think of female dominance, they think of pain, and that is a great pity. Although sensation play has its place in a scene, it is not necessarily the most important element. Suspense, the linchpin of good drama, is far more important, although it cannot stand alone. Because pain and suspense work together so closely, I've decided to deal with them as twin aspects of a single topic. To make any scene work, you must build suspense in your subject. Pain alone, even humiliation alone, will not produce the tension and then the release he needs. Relying on physical pain to produce effective subordination, a crude technique at best, ultimately fails because you've not made the pain meaningful. Havelock Ellis, one of the earliest experts in sexual psychology, wrote that suspense, not suffering, is what the submissive truly desires. For example, a strange woman walking up to him and slapping him would scarcely make him feel aroused. The incident might later provide a basis for his fantasies, in which the submissive would construct a story to explain the pain, thereby adding suspense and significance. In short, it's the plot, the enacted drama, not the punishment, that gives a submissive release. Controlling a male's body does not suffice to control his mind. Otherwise, he would spend every minute of his work day thinking of work, every minute at the dinner table thinking about food, and so on. You should know that even when he is bound to a backboard or forced into ladies' clothing, you must supply him with fantasies, the script, or his mind will wander. In such situations, of course, his mind is likely to wander towards fantasy anyway, but they're his fantasies, which he chooses and controls, and will not be as effective for him and satisfying for you as the fantasies and ideas you introduce. Even a heavily symbolic punishment, such as spanking, can be felt as meaningless pain unless accompanied by a compelling fantasy. And again, yours, if well chosen and enticingly presented, will work better than his own. No, the only way to control even the most lamb-like submissive is to control his thoughts. Suspense is one of your most efficacious tools to command your submissive's wandering attention. Anyone can inflict pain, but few people can make it erotic and fulfilling. If raw pain were really what he craved, he could get into bar fights and be equally happy, or even happier, or drive his car into a bridge and suffer for months in a body cast. Neither of these dreadful ideas, which I sincerely beg you will not consider even for a moment, is in the least erotic. Therefore, if you give him a smaller dose of pain, but a greater measure of suspense, he will obey you more readily and respect you more thoroughly, and you will both be more fulfilled. Using suspense effectively is the first mark of a top-notch disciplinarian, even one who enacts the role of Amazon or governess. Mystery and anticipation. Now that suspense has been demonstrated to be vital to the successful establishment of your authority, you may be asking precisely how you can use suspense, or even how to create it in the first place. The two elements of suspense are mystery and anticipation. Although they would seem to be mutually exclusive, they actually work together in the hands of a skilled mistress. Mystery is based on surprise. The submissive wonders what will happen next, and alternatively hopes and fears. Maybe mistress won't punish me, but she always does. Anticipation is based on recognition. The submissive knows exactly what will happen next and endures the same vacillation. Maybe it won't hurt so much this time, but last time it did. The pleasure of the changing seasons is exactly the same mingling of mystery and anticipation. Each spring is the same, yet each is different. We enjoy both recognition and surprise when the daffodils bloom every year. To make the same 3 or 4 fantasies constantly interesting, you must vary them slightly. Enough to be fresh and exciting, not enough to distort their message. If you fall into a routine with your fantasy script, always scolding him for the same crime and punishing him in the same way, your submissive will sense no mystery and feel no anticipation, and will soon grow restless and dissatisfied. Foster the sense of mystery by doing things slightly differently each time. Try out new sensations and new variations on the fantasy. I provide suggestions for these later in the book. If he is never quite sure what will happen next, whatever you do will have extra power. Add to the mystery by letting him think you plan one particular chastisement, and then at the last minute altering it slightly in duration, instrument, audience, or style. You can also make mysterious promises or allow him glimpses of a new costume or implement, and then watch the suspense work in him. Encourage anticipation by telling him precisely what you plan to do, and then make him wait for you to do it. Gauging a vassal's readiness to be punished is a delicate matter. You must let him suffer anticipation long enough to extract all the pain from the waiting, but not so long as to leave him feeling bored and neglected. Careful attention to maintaining proper suspense means that you will need to inflict less physical pain. By involving his mind, you create a better scene and earn him a deeper catharsis. Inflicting punishment, ending the suspense. The threat of punishment and the suspense of awaiting punishment are all very well, but at some point you will have to actually punish your submissive. When you do so, your submissive should feel that the suspense of waiting has been so dreadful that he could not have borne it for one more second, while still facing the actual chastisement with fear and trembling. The techniques of punishment are discussed in chapters 7 and 8, with notes in each fantasy chapter for the best use of these methods. Nevertheless, the dominance you show is far more important than the pain you inflict. Almost all punishment a mistress inflicts is done with the implied consent of the submissive. To be honest, few disciplinarians are muscular enough to enforce their commands on an unwilling submissive male, at least not without unbecoming struggle. Most of us rely on moral authority and the power of dominance, coupled with occasional bounce of severity. Thus, establishing your authority over the male is essential. You must make him acknowledge your command and dread crossing you in any way. Only then will your chastisements be significant. Although physically he could fight you off and escape the punishment, that choice must be unthinkable to him. He must be willing to lie over your lap to be spanked, knowing he could escape, but refusing to do so because escaping would ultimately be more painful than any whipping could possibly be. The threat of worse whippings is not enough to produce that state of mind. Only psychological dominance can do so. The language of power. From punishment to language seems a strange and unexpected leap, yet one of the mistress's strongest tools is language. In a later section, we will continue the use of the voice itself in establishing your command. But now we are looking at the power of mere vocabulary. The dominance name. The proper choice of words can both express and sustain your power in the relationship. The simplest demonstration of this great truth is how your submissive addresses you during a session. I doubt that he calls you sugar, toots, or the old ball and chain. Instead, he calls you by your dominance name, ma'am, mistress, or perhaps Mistress Lorelei. Such formality is conducive to discipline and a proper atmosphere of submission. Some nursemaids and governesses like to be addressed as Miss or Mrs. Jones, using their own last name or one they have chosen for its disciplinary connotations. Miss Birch is very popular. So is Miss Marwood for the great fictional governess. Others preferred to be called Mama or Auntie while they are correcting their charges. The effect of the change of your name is immense. When your submissive calls you by your dominance name, he must acknowledge your authority and your power. Furthermore, he realizes that he is not now dealing with his wife or girlfriend, but with a female tyrant whom he must obey or suffer the consequences. The change of identities establishes your influence during scenes and helps you maintain a healthy relationship the rest of the time. Not only should you select a dominance name and strictly enforce its use, but you must also choose a new name to bestow on your submissive. Brook no arguments from him about what names he likes or wants. You must provide his new identity in order to control him whenever you invoke it. Addressing him by his submission name is an unmistakable signal that the dominance session is about to begin. After some practice, he will slip into obedience and passivity as soon as you call him by his submission name, just as you will take command whenever you hear your dominance name. What names are effective choices for a submission name? Males who dream of being sissy maids respond well to such frilly feminine names as Cindy, Yvette, or Bitsy. Males who desire a governess or nursemaid respond best to childhood nicknames, especially diminutives, Bobby, Freddie, Ricky, or during discipline to his full name, Robert Edward James, bend over. Other dominance names. In the world of childhood, every object is known and named. You must strive to recreate this atmosphere in your fantasy sessions. Thus, you should give dominance names to your favorite discipline implements and techniques, as well as to your various body parts. The names should emphasize female power and harmonize with the submissive's fantasies. A certain playfulness in naming adds a special fillip to the names. A much feared petal might become Mistress Pattycake. A naughty submissive in need of bondage could be told that he must spend some time with Mistress Bonnie. The invitation to wear some pretty jewelry could refer to the attachment of nipple clamps. Genitalia should also be named, partly because there are a few really pleasant or attractive words in English for them, partly in order to heighten the atmosphere of a secret world. Choose a powerful and sexy name for your femaleness. Mistress Gloria or Mistress Victoria are good names because they are simultaneously suggestive of the wonders within and easy to slip into apparently innocent conversations. Tell a submissive you need to spend some time with Vicky, dear, and he is instantly aware that you are demanding a long session of cunnilingus. And that's the sort of message you could leave with a secretary without embarrassing either of you. It is also your duty to rename his genitalia. The name should emphasize his juvenile and inferior status without being so mocking as to render him impotent. A slightly childish name for his penis and 2 alliterative names for his testicles will equip you to tease him and torment him to your heart's content. Appropriate sets and props. Setting also contributes a great deal to the effectiveness of the scene. If you have space enough to set aside a room for play, you may decorate it as fantasy dictates, a dungeon, a schoolroom, or a frilly bedroom. Most of us have limited space, but an ordinary room may be decorated with subtle hints of domestic discipline, with a 4-poster bed, wooden hairbrushes, and attractive ribbon-tied arrangements of birch branches. If your submissive desires to be disciplined by a stern schoolmarm, buy an antique school desk to bend him over, and hang a framed blackboard above the scene for his punishment writings, or to display your written judgment of his naughtiness. You may also wish to enhance the mood with carefully chosen lighting, music, incense, or other sense stimulators. However, do these carefully. The incense and candles, natural to an Amazon or goddess fantasy, are totally out of place in a classroom or nursery setting. Nor would a sissy maid fit naturally into a black-painted dungeon. Props, of course, would include all the delightful implements of correction, humiliation, and restraint. From a leather strap to audio tapes of punishment sessions to the very Victorian blackboard. But these implements vary depending on fantasy and are discussed under their individual fantasy headings. But why would you, the mistress, trouble to create a particular atmosphere at all, much less decide whether your male slave would prefer a warm and cozy nursery or a stern prison cell? Because the point of fantasy is escape, and the emotional release is amplified by taking place in a congenial setting. Your fantasies will be far more effective if they are enacted in their proper environment. Costumes. Extreme care must be taken in the selection of appropriate costumes for dominatrix and submissive, for this aspect of the fantasy is almost as crucial to a satisfying session as a properly chosen method of castigation. Well, especially at first. It's a vile generalization to assert that men are sexually aroused by what they see, but it's usually true. Most guy subs have spent years visualizing exactly how the mistress of their dreams will dress. If you want a direct grip on his libido, your clothing and makeup can provide it. Moreover, certain clothes can become a subtle or not so subtle signal that it's time to play. Whether it's that special shade of burgundy lipstick or a particular pair of shoes, your mistress garb can arouse you both. Depending on your comfort and desire and on the chosen fantasy, you may appear in a severe business suit, in a slip-in stockings, or in thigh-high leather boots and matching corset. Though in my experience, it's hard to swing a flogger when you're confined in that way. A simple black t-shirt and matching jeans can be as effective a costume as all the leather and steel regalia in the world. You need to decide how much of your submissive's visual sense you want to please, how much you want to tease. Also, frankly, how much do you enjoy dressing up? If you love it, you can choose elaborate outfits by fantasy. Or you can relax and say to hell with it. You're the dom, remember? Likewise, the submissive could be wearing anything from nothing at all to diapers. The fantasy itself usually dictates what types of clothing should be worn. That some change of clothing is necessary is mandated by the principles we have been using all along. The better the scene setting, the better the fantasy. Every day you judge people by their clothing. So instantaneously, you may not be aware that you are classifying the people you pass as students, homeless, wealthy, artistic, working class, or computer nerds. You may not always be accurate, but you do read the clothing messages others offer. Still doubtful? Consider the effect of uniforms. When a man in a white coat wearing a stethoscope tells you to undress, you probably do. In the same office with the same man dressed as a policeman making the same request, you would demand his strip search warrant and then comply. If a man in a hard hat told you to do so, you'd refuse unless he were your lover. You don't usually ask the man in white to prove he's a doctor whose diplomas hang on the wall. Instead, the power of the uniform convinces you. You can take advantage of this effect by dressing in a way that spells power to your submissive. And for every male, that costume is different. Find out his fantasies. Look at the pictures of doms that he collects, and you can deduce his internal image of female authority. By dressing to invoke that image, you can exert greater power over him with less effort. Costume also has an influence, not only on how others see us, but on how we see ourselves. Your domination garb should make you feel proud, stern, magnificent. Whether you select black leather embellished with metal studs or a lady's riding habit circa 1890, the costume should mean power to you as well. Likewise, when you dress a male in women's clothing, he feels helpless, excited, and ashamed all at once. Dressing him as a baby, a schoolboy, or a prisoner will similarly alter the way that he acts. There is also a very practical consequence that a half-naked male or one dressed in a French maid's uniform cannot very well escape from your control. He would be too ashamed if someone else saw him dressed as his secret fantasy. And that fantasy is the real key. If a vassal is dressed properly, his hidden self is both revealed and defined by his clothing. Costumes remove inhibition because they change identity. Even a doctor might hesitate to tell you to undress without her stethoscope and white coat. Persuasive acting. Perhaps acting is the wrong word here, but I'm using a theatrical metaphor throughout the book, so I may as well continue. When I speak of acting, I am not in any way assuming that you are insincere in your dominance. I intend acting to signify the techniques an actress uses to convey a character. Voice, gesture, and carriage. A great script, if poorly performed, may be a bore. Thus, your dominance cannot be complete unless everything you say and do expresses it. Not just your words, but also your voice. Not just your actions, but your very body language. You have to live the part. Tone of voice. Many women speak apologetically in soft, scared little voices, more suited to girls than women. Learn to speak firmly, sometimes even harshly, to your submissive. If you have problems, practice using a tape recorder. You'll find it extraordinarily liberating to use your voice to its fullest potential, to let all your forbidden emotions to be revealed in your voice. Try varying the tone of your voice. Does he respond more to sweet, mocking tone or to an abrupt, commanding tone? In all cases, you should speak with an assurance and authority. You will convince both him and yourself that you are in charge. Gesture and carriage. Commonly known as body language, gesture and carriage include such nonverbal communications as eye contact, facial expression, and body stance. The way you walk, sit, stand, smile, and hold your chin both express and dominate whether you are dominant or submissive in any situation. The dominant person maintains eye contact while the submissive drops his gaze. The mistress moves strongly with free strides and broad gestures, while the submissive limits the amount of space he takes up. The dominatrix smiles rarely, the slave often. The dominant woman is free to look where she pleases, while the male cringes and looks away. The mistress holds up her head. The submissive hangs his. By moving with confidence, you can rule him without a word. Preparing for the part. Before a discipline session, you might wish to spend some time getting yourself into the role of dominatrix. Review your script, check your implements, and practice your mistress voice and carriage until you can snap into your dominant state instantaneously with no thought. A little rehearsal is conducive to a smooth running and successful fantasy. When you have become a skilled mistress, you may not need such extensive preparation, but it is always wise to remember that the mistress cannot take her authority for granted. You must earn it with the force and vividness of your fantasies, the effectiveness of your disciplinary methods, and the compelling power of your personality. Pleasure. One of the best ways to establish and maintain your authority is by enjoying domination. When your submissive sees the pleasure he can give you, he feels happy and grateful and needed. He wants to give you more. Certainly there are moments when pleasure is inappropriate. Submissives never want to see the mistress smile, but the vast majority want to see you having a good time, especially when you're punishing or consoling them. Otherwise, he may feel that you don't like female domination or you're doing it unwillingly, and therefore that he is secretly directing the action. Your showing pleasure may entail as little as smiling sternly when you brandish the birch, or as much as multiple orgasms. Show delight in all the various scenes of the fantasy, enjoying his costume, smiling when you threaten to punish him, and so forth. After all, a happy mistress makes a happy slave. Showing delight, of course, is predicated on your feeling delight. If you're not having a good time, adjust your scene until you are.